let me just erase this first of all, and then we're going to continue with our lecture, guys. Okay, now let's talk about trend analysis in budgeting. Okay, so trend analysis in budgeting is important. Why? Because budget structure is mostly based on the historical data. Historical data sometimes shows patterns to the decision makers. Decision makers, which that's you are, shows patterns for decision makers. Okay, to be specific, in the trend analysis, we are going to look for the trends in the data. We are trying to analyze them, of course, based on past actual figures and current figures, and then we're going to analyze their characteristics. How are we going to do that? I will show you in a second with the example how we're going to do the trend analysis. But of course, we're going to apply to this trend analysis for both revenues and expenses over here. Guys, trend analysis, simply, I'm not going to elaborate more because you got the idea by now. Trend analysis is the analysis that searches for the trends in the data and therefore establishes the same trend, or at least create the budgeting assumptions for the next period to create budgets for the next period. Okay, so okay, we are going to analyze the certain trends in some certain items. For example, we might have in the table like this, we might have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different columns in the table. Okay, this is the, let's say, financial table. But we are not going to analyze trends in, for example, all of the columns. We're going to take a look at some certain variables to analyze the trends. Okay, so this part is talking about that as well. They're talking about what I just said right now. So we're gonna take a look at the logics in the trend, the patterns in the trend, and then we're gonna analyze. We're gonna decide if there's a trend or not, and then we will treat the budgeting process to create budgets with or without the trend for the next periods. Okay, well, I can talk about this, of course, for a long time, but I don't need to, because whenever I show the example to you guys, it will be much more clear, it will be much more understandable, therefore your understanding will be maximized with the in-class exercise we're gonna jump into right now. And let me just clean the screen first. Okay, and then we're gonna see how it works. Okay, guys, perfect. Okay, so imagine that Manny's Motel has 36,500 rooms available each year. Cool. We have 36,500 rooms available. Keep that in mind. Operational figures for the years between 2008 and 2011 are shown in the table. So look, this is the table we have, guys, okay? This is the table we have. So let's just read the table, and then I'm going to show you the question. We have years between 2008 to 2011. We have number of rooms sold from 08 to 11, corresponding numbers we have. We have the occupancy percentage, corresponding percentages. We have ADR, corresponding dollar values. Therefore, we have the room revenue, corresponding room revenue. So this is the operational data for Manny's Motel, and let's take a look at the question. The question is, based on the operational data table above, budget the room revenue for Manny's Inn in 2012 and estimate the percentage change in room revenue in 2012 over 2011. Guys, we have two questions over here. The first question is, we are going to budget, question mark, we are going to budget 2012, okay? And then second question mark, we are going to analyze the delta in 2011 over 2012 over 2011, okay? Guys, what are we going to do? Where are we going to start? These are the main questions in my head right now, and then probably these are the main questions that you have in your mind right now. So we are going to get into the details right now. Guys, keep this in mind. Okay, I'm going to erase this, but keep that in mind, because I'm going to draw the budget over here. Let me just use a different marker. Okay. We have years 08, 09, 10, 11. Let me just put the cutoff line over here. we have number of rooms sold, okay, we have occupancy percentage, we have ADR, and we have the room revenue, let's say RR, okay. So guys, I want you to, let me just erase this. I want you to forget about the numbers for a second, okay? What we're going to do, we are going to look for the trend in the data, okay? And we're going to analyze if we have a trend or not. If we have a trend, we're going to follow it because it is, excuse me, it is safe for decision makers to follow the trend in the immediate past data for the next one. So our objective is to budget 2012. If there's a trend in between those years, it is safe and logical for a manager to follow the trend for the next year, which is 2012, because you know we are trying to find out 2012 trends over here, guys, okay? And then we're going to analyze the delta, the change in 2012 over 2011, okay? In 2012 over 2011. Guys, what we're going to do right now, we're going to analyze every single column to decide which one to look at. So take a look. Do I need to analyze the trend in years? Absolutely not, because every single year there's a 1 year incremental. Therefore, there is no need for us to analyze any trend in the year column over here. So let me just use this part right here. Hang on, just give me 1 second, please. So this column right here is out of scope, okay? Number of rooms sold. I may or may not analyze the trend in number of rooms sold, okay? But most likely we don't need that. Why? Because number of rooms sold is driven by occupancy percentage and number of rooms available. So occupancy percentage is number of rooms available multiplied by, hang on, occupancy I'm sorry. Please excuse me. Number of rooms sold is equal to number of rooms available multiplied by occupancy percentage. That means number of rooms available is driven by occupancy percentage and number of rooms available. Therefore, if there's a change in occupancy percentage or change in number of rooms available in the long run, okay, this column becomes irrelevant because this column is driven by a column right here. Therefore, it doesn't make sense for a hospitality manager, director, to analyze the trend in number of rooms sold. Again, you can, but it doesn't make too much of a sense when you have one of the drivers of the number of rooms sold. Therefore, occupancy percentage column is right here, is one of the columns that I'm going to look trends in, okay? Check mark, ADR. ADR is set independently, okay? Just like occupancy percentage. Occupancy percentage is set by the consumer customer traffic, okay? Therefore, let me skip ADR for a second, okay? No, let me just talk about ADR. So, since ADR derives room revenues, because room revenues are equal to ADR multiplied by number of rooms sold, am I right? Yes. Number of rooms sold, okay? And since room revenues are dependent on ADR, because ADR moves independently, and based on the ADR, room revenues are determined. Therefore, we're going to take a look at the trend in ADR, and therefore it doesn't make sense for us to analyze the trend in the room revenues. Again, you can as a decision maker, but it might not make too much sense since you have the ADR that drives the room revenue, and therefore since you have the occupancy that derives the number of rooms sold, and year is out anyways. Do you see what I'm talking about, guys? So this is how I analyze the table, how I read the table to determine if there's a trend or not, okay? The next step is, let me just clear all these first. The next step becomes, I'm going to see if there's a trend in both ADR and occupancy percentage, and then if yes, I will continue the trend, okay? Not necessarily in real life, by the way, but it is safe and logical for a manager to assume and continue the trend because our data is based on the past immediate data, okay? If there is no trend, we're going to take one action, but let me show you when we get to the solution part, okay, guys? So let me just erase everything first. And then I will show you the solution. So, well, before we get to the solution, actually. Okay. Do you think, because we can analyze trends right here, do you think if there's a trend in occupancy percentage? Let's analyze it. 70% to 72%, 2% up, increase. 72 to 73, 1% increase. 73 to 75, 2% increase. So look, 2% increase, 1% increase, 2% increase. It is safe for a manager to assume that there might most likely be a percent increase for 2011 in occupancy percentage. Therefore, there is a trend in occupancy percentage. The trend is 2% up, 1% up, and 2% up. These are the in-between years. 08 to 09, 09 to 10, 10 to 11, okay? Therefore, for 11 to 12, it is safe for a manager to follow the trend 2, 1, 2, 1 up, 1% up. It is the trend in occupancy percentage, guys, okay? So, we established this. Take a look at the ADR. 40 bucks to 42, $2 up. 42 to 45, $2 up. 42 to 45, $3 up. 45 to 49, $4 up. Oh, look, there is something we catch over here. 2, 3, 4. Therefore, it is logical for a manager to assume that for 2012, the ADR might most likely be $5 more than the one in 2011. Therefore, we're going to create a trend over here. Therefore, our second trend is ADR 2 up, 3 up, 4 up. For 11, 12 period, it is safe for us to increase the ADR by 5% because 2, 3, 4, 5, $1 incrementals, okay? So for, it will be the trend in ADR. Guys, we're going to use the trends right here to solve for what we need to solve for 2012, okay? So take a look at the solution steps right here, guys. Take a look at my solution steps. As you see in the table above, there are two different trends that we catch in both ADR and occupancy percentage. Trend in occupancy percentage, 2% up, 1%, 2%. Therefore, we are going to increase the occupancy for 2012 by 1%. And we established that there's also a trend in ADR. The trend was $2, $3, and $4 since 08. Therefore, it is logical for a decision maker to increase ADR by 5% for 2012. And now we are going to factor those in to solve for the room revenue budgeted for 2012. Okay. Estimated room revenue will be number of rooms available multiplied by occupancy percentage multiplied by ADR. Take a look. My occupancy percentage will be 1% up. Okay, it was 75%. Now it's going to be 76% because of the trend. And then in 2011, my ADR was $49, but now we're going to assume that it's going to be up by $5, therefore it's going to be $54. When I do the math, multiply this guy with this and with this, I will have $14,98,960, okay, almost $1.5 million estimated room revenue budgeted for 2012, guys, okay? So this is how I'm going to analyze the trends and then factor the, implement the trends in our solutions and then budget the next period. In this case, it's 2012. Guys, the next question was the change, and of course, for if you would like to analyze any change in any variable, we have to get the current variable minus the previous variable and over the previous variable. So in this case, the room revenue change percentage is equal to room revenue in current year minus room revenue in prior year over room revenue in prior year. This is the room revenue for 2012 budgeted. This is the room revenue for 2011. This is the same room revenue for 2011. When I do the math, guys, room revenues will be increased by 11.67% because of the trends that we follow. Because why? Because past data shows us a specific trend here, okay? What if there is no trend? What are we gonna do? So this is my second question right here, guys. Let's see. We're gonna analyze it, but take a look at it. When I'm erasing the screen, try to have that sink in, and then try to think a little bit that what if we don't have a trend? Almost done. Okay, guys. If we don't have a trend, okay, the most and basic but sometimes most effective approach is just to take an arithmetic average, okay? Def and Jeff Boutique Hotel is the question over here. Let's say they have 36,500 rooms available each year. Operational figures are represented in the table below. So I'm going to talk about the table in a second. Let me just erase this. Talk about table in a second. From 2010 to 2013, number of rooms sold we have, occupancy percentage, ADR, room revenue we have, okay? And then we have the corresponding numbers. What we're going to do, guys, based on this table right here, we are going to budget the room revenue for Def and Jeff Boutique Hotel for 2014, because remember, we have the data from 2010 to 2013. We are going to find 2014 room revenues for Def and Jeff. Def and Jeff Boutique Hotel. Guys, let me tell you something. As you know that in this example, the variables we have, years, number of rooms sold, occupancy percentage, ADR, room revenue, they are the same. But in the test, in the quizzes, or in something else, or in real life, those variables can be different. All you have to do, you have to look for what drives what, okay? We don't care about number of years. Why? Because it's just number of years, okay? Number of rooms sold is driven by occupancy percentage. If number of rooms sold is driven by occupancy percentage, this will be irrelevant, okay? Room revenues are driven by ADR. If room revenues are driven by ADR, this will be irrelevant. Therefore, occupancy percentage and ADR, okay, will be the ones that we're going to look for the trends. This could be a different variable, so always analyze the tables just like how we did right now, so you don't have to miss so you don't miss any questions, and your analysis will be very, very correct based on the trend analysis. Okay, guys? So let's analyze the table right now. We don't care about this. We don't care about this. We don't care about this. Do I have a trend in occupancy percentage? $4 up. So 4% up, 1% up. 3% up. 413 doesn't tell us anything. No trend. ADR. Minus $2 down. Up $7. Up $5. Minus 2 plus 7 plus 5. It's hard to tell the certain logic, certain trend, certain pattern in the past data. Therefore, we are going to take an arithmetic average for both ADR and occupancy percentage, okay? And then we are going to incorporate the arithmetic average results into the room revenue budgeting process, because there's no trend in either occupancy, there's no trend in either occupancy or ADR, okay? So this is how I find the arithmetic average for occupancy percentage. From 2010 to 2013, I'm going to put every single corresponding number. Since I have 4 years, divided by 4, 59.25% will be the assumption for the budgeting process for 2014, guys. And I will do the same thing for the ADR. As you can see, I have 4 different ADRs because I have 4 years. I'm going to divide by 4 right here, okay? And $63.25 will be my budgeting assumption in the entire process for 2014, and then I will be able to find out, and then I will be able to find out the estimated room revenue, okay? Number of rooms available, multiplied by occupancy percentage, multiplied by ADR, 36,500, number of rooms available, 59.25%, the average occupancy because there's no trend in occupancy. 63.25 is the average ADR because there's no trend in ADR. When I do the math, guys, almost $1.4 million will be the estimated room revenue to be budgeted for 2014. If the question asks you to analyze the change, you know how to do it right now from the previous example, okay? Well, this was the trend analysis in revenues. What about the expenses right now, guys? Okay, take a look. Since expenses are categorized in relation to the operating departments, guys, okay, either direct or indirect expenses or whatever, okay, we will have to analyze the expenses slightly different than the budget because expenses are usually the proportional to sales volume and therefore the revenues, okay? Therefore, it makes much more sense for us to analyze the change in between the years rather than take a look at the raw corresponding numbers. You will see what I'm talking about. The ultimate reason is that, again, it is because the expenses most of the time, not always, but most of the time expenses are proportional to the changing sales volumes. That's the ultimate reason. Therefore, we're going to take a look at a different trend in expenses right now. Take a look at this J-Tonde hotel data. We have years from 2009 to 2012, and we have advertising expense. So, excuse me. So, what we used to do in revenues, we used to analyze difference between the corresponding numbers. Am I right, guys? Yeah. So let's say 1,500 difference, almost right here, 1890, up, and here, of course, these are dollar values, and here, almost, let's say 1,400. Okay, almost. Sorry, not 1,400. $2,400. Okay. So look, there is no trend over here because, again, looking at the differences in corresponding numbers will most likely show no trend. However, there might be a trend in the in individual change percentages because, again, most of the time expenses are proportional to changing sales volumes. Okay, guys? We know this from the second chapter. We're going to budget the advertising expense for 2013 right here. This is our ultimate objective. So we just take a look at the difference between the corresponding numbers from 9 to 12. Okay, this part right here, we cannot see anything. However, let's analyze something else to see if we can see anything. Let's analyze the percentage change in between the years. For example, for 2009, 2010, okay, current value minus previous value over previous value, 5% increase in advertising expense from 2009 to 2010. Let me analyze. These are delta changes, guys. These are delta changes, okay? Let me analyze the same thing between 2010 2011. Current value, previous value, previous value. Oh, look, 6% increase in advertising expense. Advertising expense. 5% increase, 6% increase, advertising expense. The last year, 11 to 12. Current value, previous value, previous value. Oh, look, 7% increase, exactly 7% increase in advertising expense, okay? Now, this is the trend in advertising expenses or in any expense columns. Could be marketing, could be something else, okay? So, again, usually the differences in dollar values, corresponding dollar values, does not tell much, okay? And since we know that, expenses are proportional to changing sales volume, it makes sense for a manager to analyze delta percentage change, I mean delta percentages changes in between years in in terms of percentage to look for a trend. And clearly in this example we catch the trend right here. It is so clear, and this is what I'm talking right now. 1% increase from advertising expense, 1% increase, and then we can estimate the advertising expense for 2013 because they're all 1% increases, meaning it is logical, it makes sense actually to assume that there will be 8% increase in advertising expense for 2013. And take a look. How am I going to calculate this? When I let me just see something. When I take the past year's expense amount and multiply it by 1 plus a certain trend. The trend is 8%, 5, 6, 7, 8. I'm just following the trend, okay? And when I do the math, right here, I will have almost $39 million estimated advertising expense to be budgeted next year. So this is how we come up with the trend analysis in the expense item, guys, okay? If there is no trend in certain budget estimation for expenses, again we are going to utilize the arithmetic average method. Okay, so we're gonna find the arithmetic average just like we did for the revenues. Or it is, we can, as a decision maker, you can follow some certain other logics as well. But of course you have to justify it very well. Corporate might just ask you to justify it well. In addition to budgeting process with trends, guys, alternatively we have the standard amounts, meaning hospitality operations, they have the standards. For example, for every 5 hours, 100 plates has to be served in a banquet, in a banquet events or big events. Or we have to hire 10 people at $7 an hour for 3 hours. Okay, so these are the standards. What they do, some of the hospitality companies, if they don't see a trend, they establish standards and then they compare the actual numbers with the standard and they come up with the budgeting process. Actually, that's what we're going to do in variance analysis after the trend analysis. Okay. Moreover, we have zero-based budgeting, which means literally everything starts with zero. Everything starts with the $0 right here. And then as we go in our operation, we decide the expense items. Okay, for example, we're going to take a look at 3-month period, and then we're going to see where we stop at the end of the 3 months. Okay, so in zero-based budgeting, everything starts with zero. Everything starts with zero, and then we decide where we're going to stop for a certain expense. Usually, hourly employees outsourcing operations utilizes zero-based budgeting a lot, and then they establish the standards after that, and then they budget their expense categories, in labor or hourly employees, and so on and so forth.